Now that my paint has dried, I can add some details with my Sharpie, which I think will be much easier than if I tried to add details using my small brush and black paint. So I've got to first plan out where I want to put my eyes. Do I want to put them on the sides here, on the angle part, which might be hard, or do I want to put them along the top? You got to figure out what you like for the design of yours. And I'm going to use my Sharpie. I think I'm going to put my eyes right here up at the top. So I'm going to put my circles on. I want to take my time because I don't want to get Sharpie where I don't want it. So I'm going to add that in. I like the little highlight in the eye, so I might leave that little highlight in there. And I'm going to do one on the other side. Go nice and slow. It is a little lumpy, so it's hard to make it perfect, but I'm sure it will look great at the end. So I've got my two eyes on there. I like Piglet's little eyebrows. I'm going to add those on. Like that. I am going to leave off the mouth on mine because the mouth would have to pretty much go here, which I think might look silly, but you figure out what you like for the design of yours. Once you've got your head complete, we are ready to attach it to our frame that we created. Now, I'm going to hot glue this for you. So when you're ready, you can ask me for some hot glue and we'll stick that on. If your frame ended up with some extra paint where you didn't intend for it to be, you can strategically place your head to cover up those mistakes, or you can make that part of the body, which we can paint over. So maybe I would turn it this way, add the head up here, and try and include this in my Piglet body. But you have to figure out what works best for you. I'm going to hot glue this one onto my frame. All right, now that mine is attached to my cardboard frame, I got to figure out what I want the body to look like. So that's what I was planning on here. If you change your mind, that's fine. But you should have an image of your character up on your Chromebook for you to look at and figure out how you want it to look. So I noticed Piglet's body goes right below his head. He doesn't really have a neck. So I'm going to draw in the body first. Let's see how I did that here. So I'm going to figure out how I want that. And you're basically drawing them inside your frame. A lot of times it's going to end up getting cut off, kind of like that, which is fine. I'm going to make his body come out like this. So I'm not drawing in Piglet's legs, obviously, because that part of his body is getting cut off. And then I'm going to keep in mind his arms, but I like the way I drew it here better so that it looks a little bit more exciting. So I'm going to have his shoulder come down and sketch out his arms. Once you have yours all drawn out, you can see my pencil lines on mine, you're ready to start painting. And while you don't so much need your messy mat because your painting part is on the inside and not going all the way to the edge, the messy mat will come in handy if you need to still mix some colors. So I need the dark pink this time for his body, and I need light pink for the arm. So I'm just going to start with the dark pink since I have it already in my tray. Now if you have lines, like I have lines on Piglet's body here, I can just paint right over those for now, and I can add those lines in with a Sharpie when I'm all done, because trying to paint a skinny line like that is possible. You could do that with a small brush, but I find it a lot easier to do it with the Sharpie. Now also, as you are painting, you want to make sure you're not getting paint on your head, so you got to be careful with the angle you approach your art. I don't want to start painting this way where I might bump my wet paint onto his face. I want to be very careful near his head that I'm not getting paint where I don't want it. So I'm just going to go right over my lines. And again, we want to keep in mind how we're using our brush, that we lay it down with enough paint on it that we can drag it slowly and we get a nice clean crisp edge like that. I don't want to get paint on my frame that I designed. So again, I need to think about how I'm holding my brush as I do this, that I am dragging it slowly and not ending up with paint where I don't want it. So if I keep dragging this like this and I bump into this, I'm going to end up with a problem. So I have to think about how I'm holding my brush, sometimes how you're positioning your art on your table, and painting that in like that. I'm going to drag it slowly along the edge so I don't have those fuzzy edges, but I have nice crisp lines along the edge of my character. Don't leave blobs of paint on your work either. We want to make everything nice and smooth. If you have something super small that is hard to get with this brush, you can ask me for the smaller brush and we can do that. But even this arm, I think I can mostly paint it with this brush. Painting it with this brush would take a lot more time and effort to make it look neat. So now I'm ready to do Piglet's arm. Since I already have pink on my brush, I'm just going to grab a little bit of that pink and I got to grab my white. Make sure as you're getting colors, you're not doing this. I had to pour a brand new white in this tray because somebody just was completely careless with their color. I am obviously not going to take this pink brush and stick it into my white. I need to clean it first. So you're going to bounce your brush in your cup of water, kind of like that. Make sure you're getting the color off. And then you have your paper towel so that you don't end up with watery looking paints. So make sure you are wiping it on the side, not tapping it so we don't splatter water. And you make a brush sandwich and pull out the extra like that. Okay, once my brush is nice and clean, now I can take this fresh white that I poured in here and I'm going to add a little scoop of that to my pink. As you are mixing, make sure you're not spreading it out in a big pile, because if you do that, you pretty much end up painting the paper. And you don't want to paint the paper. You want to save that paint for your art. So I'm trying to keep it into a small, tight pile of mixed color. I'm going to get some of that extra off my brush. All right, now I'm ready to paint Piglet's arm. So again, I need to be careful with how I'm using my brush. I don't want to just go like this because then I will end up with color where I don't want it. I got to think about how I'm positioning this to get into these spaces neatly. So it takes time and effort to paint it carefully. But along this part of my arm, I can hold my brush this way. And I'm going to go around the curve. I'm smoothing out my paint. When I'm trying to get into tight corners like this, I don't necessarily need this smaller brush. I can just hold my brush more up and down. And if I do that, I have a pointier part of my brush to get into those tight spaces. I'm going to turn mine this way so it's easier for me to paint. And again, I got to be careful that my edges look nice and neat as I am painting that in. Alright, the next thing I'm going to have to do is wait for this to dry before I can add my black lines, because I cannot add my black lines on wet paints. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to leave it like that to dry. Now that mine has dried completely, I can add some marker to it, hopefully without ruining my marker. Although sometimes the paint does get onto the tip of the marker and kind of mess it up a little bit, but I'm going to hope for the best. I'm going to trace these lines that I can still see through my paint, but if you can't see them, you can just draw yours back in like that. I could leave my piglet like this at this point, or if I want to outline the other parts of his body with my Sharpie, I could do that as well. And just like with our picture frame, that helps kind of just tidy everything up. Any rough looking edges that you have, you can fix up by tracing it carefully and slowly. And it helps to turn your art so you have the right angle to approach it from as you are tracing around. Now, if you don't want to do this step, You don't have to. And if you are doing this step, you really need to take your time so you make it look neat and carefully done. I'm not going to trace my head because my head is 3D and pops off my art, and that might look silly if I start to try to trace it, but I really love the way my piglet looks, and I think my art is done. Can't wait to see yours. Make sure you cap up any markers you were using when you're done with them.